She is the kind of woman who stays with you, not because she tried to, not because she performed her value, not because she made herself small to be loved, but because she never asked you to complete her in the first place. Before we dive into 6 habits that make an independent woman intriguing, make sure to subscribe for more videos like this. She is remembered in rooms she has long left, not for volume, but for gravity. The air around her always felt a little sharper, like silence had finally learned how to speak. Her independence is not rebellion and not defense. It is not the armor of someone who has sworn off closeness. It is the quiet posture of someone who has made peace with her own company and is no longer seduced by the need to be seen in order to feel real. She does not broadcast her strength, but you feel it when she walks away from something she once cared for without bitterness. She does not announce her boundaries, but you notice them in the way she holds her gaze, steady and unafraid. She is not impossible to access, only unwilling to be approached with anything less than respect. And that is what makes her unforgettable. She gives nothing she does not mean. She does not flatter to be liked. She does not soften to be kept. And still, her presence lingers in ways even she doesn't fully realize. Because in a world built to reward women for being accommodating, for bending to fit the shape of others' expectations, her refusal to contort herself becomes a quiet revolution. You cannot quite define what draws you to her, but you feel it every time you replay a conversation you had with her in your mind and realize how grounded you felt in her presence. Her stability does not look like rigidity. It looks like a woman who has built her life on values, not trends, who can sit in discomfort without fleeing, who doesn't need to dominate a room to own it. Her intrigue isn't artifice. It's not a game of seduction. It's not a brand. It's the natural consequence of a life lived from the inside out. She is not trying to be seen. She just is, fully, clearly, quietly. And that wholeness is what people remember. Not what she wore, not what she posted, but the way she made the air feel different simply by being in it. The kind of woman who holds her own gaze in the mirror, not out of pride, but out of intimacy with herself. She is not untouched by life. She has loved and lost and cried on the kitchen floor just like the rest of us, but she rose differently, not with spite, with self-respect, not to prove a point, to reclaim herself. And that reclamation shows in everything she touches. She chooses her words the way she chooses her people, with care. She leaves when something hurts too much to stay and does not ask for applause. And when she loves, it is never from need, it is from overflow. That is what makes her unforgettable. That is what makes her stay long after she is gone. Not noise, not effort, but a presence so rooted in truth that it echoes long after the world stops watching. The kind of woman who makes you want to meet yourself more honestly just because you met her. That kind of woman does not try to be intriguing. She simply is, because she is already full, already home, already whole. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are, and when that concept is lived through the lens of a woman who has stopped apologizing for her depth, her strength, and her contradictions, something quietly magnetic happens. She does not need to scream her growth or label herself enlightened. You feel it in her pauses, in the way she does not rush to fill silence with noise, in the way her presence feels like a mirror that asks nothing and reveals everything. This kind of woman has not bypassed her pain or manufactured a persona to mask her uncertainty. She has walked into the fire of her own insecurities and made peace with the ashes. The independent woman who has individuated carries both her masculine and feminine energies in balance. She is soft without collapse and firm without rigidity. She leads herself, not because she distrusts others, but because she no longer waits to be chosen. Her choices are made from alignment, not approval. Her independence is not a costume worn to defy patriarchy or to prove her worth. It is the inevitable result of a soul who has faced herself without flinching and emerged whole. You sense it in her boundaries, not as walls but as invitations to meet her with integrity. She does not explain her no. She does not chase after being understood. She lets her clarity speak for itself, and in that clarity, you either rise to meet her or you fade into the background. That is not arrogance, that is individuation. That is the kind of quiet certainty that makes her both magnetic and misunderstood, Because in a world that still romanticizes the woman who bends, who waits, who proves, she simply exists, rooted. Honest, undeniable. She has seen her own shadow and no longer fears it. That self-integration becomes a kind of glow that is difficult to name but impossible to ignore. She does not present herself as a savior or a muse or a mystery to be solved. She is not playing a role. She is simply living her truth, and in doing so, she exposes the performance in everyone else. This is why people cannot forget her. This is why her independence reads as both comforting and confrontational. She challenges without trying to. She awakens without speaking. Because when you are in the presence of someone who has done the inner work to reclaim all the fragmented parts of herself, you feel the invitation to do the same. Jung believed that wholeness was more valuable than perfection. That is her power. She is not flawless. She is real, and in her realness there is gravity. Her eyes hold depth because she has seen her own darkness and did not run. Her smile holds warmth because she no longer needs to weaponize charm for safety. And her path is hers alone because she stopped asking for directions from people who never knew where they were going. The individuated feminine is not a brand. It is not something curated or taught in a seminar. It is earned in silence, in grief, in surrender, and in truth. It is not aesthetic, it is alchemy. And when you meet a woman who has tasted that level of self-intimacy, you understand why Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. She has done that. And that is why you cannot look away. She does not wait to be asked. She does not tilt her head for approval before she speaks. She does not shrink in the presence of louder voices or louder egos. There is a stillness in her that comes from having once begged for space and realizing that the begging was the wound, not the solution. She stands now not out of defiance, but out of memory. Memory of the girl she used to be who bit her tongue and softened her tone and made herself likable just to survive the room. She remembers, and she does not go back. Her permission is her presence. Her authority is her embodiment. When she walks into a space, she is not looking to dominate or dazzle. She simply arrives with all of herself intact. That kind of wholeness is rare. And rare things unsettle those who have not met themselves. Insecure people will call her intimidating, not because she is cruel, but because she does not perform for their comfort. She does not make herself smaller to help others feel big. And yet, she is never unkind. Her power does not mock or belittle. It simply refuses to disappear. She knows her worth the way you know the sun will rise, without needing to announce it, without needing to prove it, without needing a stage. She can speak in a whisper and shift the energy of a room. She can sit in silence and still be the center of gravity, not because she demands it, but because she no longer hides from herself. That self-possession is what makes her so quietly unforgettable. It is the habit of choosing herself in moments when it would be easier to defer, deflect, or delay. She does not perform humility to appease egos. She does not seek applause to feel seen. She knows that taking up space is not a threat to anyone who has done the work to claim their own. Her independence is not a reaction. It is not rebellion. It is recognition of her voice, of her value, of her vision. She does not wait for others to name what she already knows. She no longer needs someone else to echo what she has already spoken in her own soul. That is why people remember her long after she is gone. She does not enter with noise, but her energy lingers like a question you suddenly have the courage to ask yourself. She mirrors what is possible when you stop apologizing for your existence. And because she no longer needs validation to believe her own truth, she moves through the world with a kind of poise that makes you want to sit up straighter. She reminds people of the places inside them that are still silent, still waiting for permission, and she does it without trying. That is the habit. She stands, not for effect, not for attention, but because she knows that standing in your own truth is a form of prayer, not the kind that needs words, but the kind that rewrites everything around it just by being lived. Her grounded presence is not for show. It is her foundation, and once you have stood that way, you never go back to kneeling for approval again. She used to make herself small, not because she lacked the light, but because she believed shrinking was love and softness was survival. She laughed a little quieter, spoke a little slower, smiled through interruptions, and accepted what made her feel hollow just to avoid being called too much. But something inside her broke her not with bitterness, but with clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you realize the very people you've been shrinking for will never feel safer, never feel braver, never love you more simply because you made yourself less. So she stopped. Not with rage, but with stillness. She stopped apologizing for her ambition, for her solitude, for her voice that no longer asks permission to be heard. She no longer edits herself to fit into rooms that were never built with her in mind. She does not perform palatability for the sake of being accepted by people who cannot recognize depth without fear. And in that quiet refusal, something remarkable happens. She becomes undeniable, not loud, not aggressive, not attention-seeking, but rooted. Rooted in her value, her rhythm, her sovereignty. She walks into spaces now with the full weight of her being, and those who expect her to fold for comfort find themselves disoriented. Because her stillness does not bend, her eyes do not beg, her posture does not defer. There is no need to over-explain or over-give when you are finally at peace with the truth that your existence is not a compromise. And so, she chooses solitude over shallow connection. She chooses standards over settling. She chooses truth over tolerance. Not to prove anything to anyone, but because she finally believes she is worth the kind of life that does not require her to vanish in order to be loved. Her ambition does not ask for permission. It moves like a current, steady and sure. She wants what she wants without shame. She rests without guilt. She dreams without disclaimers. And while others still tie their worth to approval, she ties hers to alignment. This confuses people who are used to transactional kindness, to conditional worth, to women who contort themselves into comfort zones that were never theirs to begin with. But she is done shrinking into spaces that cannot hold her truth. She is done softening edges that were never sharp, only misunderstood. She is done performing humility that masquerades as self-erasure. Her power is not in her resistance, but in her presence, a presence that no longer disappears. She stays, fully, even when it is uncomfortable, even when others flinch. Even when the old voice in her head whispers that being loved means being less, she has outgrown that voice. She has replaced it with the sound of her own heartbeat, steady and sacred. And that beat keeps time with a life she is no longer afraid to live out loud. This is why she lingers in the memory. This is why her energy stays with people long after she has left the room. She does not shrink to be digestible. She does not dim to soothe others. She simply is, and that is more than enough. She does not rush, not because she is lazy or detached, but because she understands that life blooms in rhythms, not in demands. She has stopped sprinting to meet artificial timelines, stopped bending to calendars that were never made for her soul, and stopped apologizing for choosing presence over pressure. She lives by something quieter now, something older than alarms and deadlines. Her timing is lunar. Her decisions, like tides, pull with a gravity that makes no sense to those who have not learned to wait. She trusts slow. She trusts quiet. She trusts the space between knowing and acting, and because of that, her life has become a sanctuary instead of a race. While others scramble for arrival, for proof, for control, she leans into the unfolding with a poise that is nearly unshakable. It unnerves people who mistake urgency for importance. She moves like a woman who knows that nothing meant for her can be missed, that forcing leads to fracture, and that peace is not found in the speed of the outcome but in the depth of the alignment. She says yes only when her body agrees. She says no without panic. She delays decisions not out of fear but out of reverence for clarity. She chooses the long route when it means integrity. Her relationship with time is sacred. She honors beginnings and endings as seasons, not events. She does not rush healing. She does not rush love. She does not rush the flowering of her purpose. And because of that, her presence carries something ancient, something patient, something rare. When she speaks, people lean in. Not because she is loud, but because her words arrive like rain after drought, deliberate, cleansing, timed with grace. When she walks into a room, there is no frenzy in her step. Her energy enters before her, not urgent, not unfinished, but whole. She knows that transformation does not happen in deadlines. It happens in devotion. It happens in cycles. It happens in the hours no one sees, the quiet choices, the gentle redirects, the holy pauses. so she no longer mimics other people's pace. She does not envy the ones who bloom early. She does not judge the ones who still wander. She knows she is on her own clock, and that clock is aligned not with productivity but with truth. This makes her both mysterious and grounding. Others feel calmer around her without knowing why. It is because she does not vibrate with the panic of proving. Her rhythm gives them permission to slow down too, to breathe. To remember that urgency is often fear in disguise. She models a different way to exist, a way rooted in intuition rather than expectation, in inner signal rather than external validation. And that kind of existence does not shout for attention. It commands respect through serenity. She is not in a hurry, not because she is lost, but because she is found in herself, found in her timing, found in the pulse of something larger than achievement. She lives like the moon, glowing fully only when it is time. And that patience, that sovereignty, that lunar rhythm makes her unforgettable. She is not rare because she fights to stand out. She is rare because she no longer needs to. Her sense of self does not come from performance, rebellion, or resistance. It comes from something deeper, something quieter. She is rooted not in ideology, but in integrity. Rooted not in defiance, but in discernment. Her life is no longer shaped by what the world demands of her, but by what her soul confirms to be true. While others chase relevance or approval, she returns again and again to her own center. Her worth is not up for negotiation. It is not pending someone else's recognition. She knows where she ends and others begin. That boundary, soft but firm, makes her feel like shelter. You can rest near her without fearing collapse, because she does not shift based on who walks into the room. She does not reach outside herself for definition. The opinions, moods, or judgments of others do not reroute her. She may listen, but she does not absorb. She may consider, but she does not conform. Her stability is not stiffness. It is clarity. It is a decision to build her life from the inside out. Every choice, every ritual, every relationship she sustains comes from alignment, not fear. And that makes her glow in a way that cannot be duplicated. You cannot package what is born of presence. You cannot copy what is cultivated in silence. She has outgrown the need to be everywhere. She has no desire to perform her power. Her life may look simple on the surface, but that simplicity is earned. It is not a lack of depth, but a filtering of noise. She is not untethered. She is deeply grounded in values she has wrestled with and reclaimed for herself. Her beauty is not curated. It is revealed in the way she lives. Her calm is not empty. It is full of the strength that comes from knowing her own thresholds. She is rooted in rituals that nourish her, in relationships that honor her, in work that reflects her truth rather than her desperation. She is rare because she is not fractured. She does not abandon herself to be chosen. She does not edit herself to be palatable. She does not shrink to be safe. Her no is clear. Her yes is sacred. Her life feels like a forest, steady, alive, and unapologetically its own. And when you are around her, something in you settles, because her presence reminds you that there is another way to live. A way that is not reactive, not performative, not dictated by scarcity. A way that is quiet, but unwavering. This kind of woman does not follow trends. She does not cling to formulas. She does not shape herself around who the world thinks she should be. She shapes her world around who she knows she is. That rootedness, that sovereign architecture of self, makes her unforgettable. It makes her feel like truth in a world addicted to illusion. It makes her rare, not because she tries to be, but because she is willing to grow down before she grows out. Her strength is not in her noise. It is in her depth, and depth, once claimed, needs no defense. It just is, and so is she. She no longer chases what she once thought she needed to survive. Not because she gave up, but because she woke up. She realized that the things she once pursued out of fear, loneliness, or longing were never sources of true fulfillment. They were mirrors reflecting back her own unworthiness. But now she creates, not in the flashy sense, not in the loud scramble to produce or impress, but in the sacred way a woman does when she finally trusts her own essence. She builds not for applause, but for alignment. She fills her space with beauty that pleases her, not performance that appeases others. Her joy is handcrafted. Her rituals are rooted. Her home, Her relationships, her calendar, they are curated with care, not crammed with obligations. She no longer needs to be everywhere to feel like she matters. Her days are not a desperate sprint toward validation. They are woven slowly, with the quiet dignity of someone who understands that presence is power. She doesn't flood a room with noise or opinions. She doesn't make herself overly available to be consumed. Instead, she brings a calm so intact that others lean in, because something about her feels like a prayer already answered. She creates energy that nourishes instead of depletes. She writes her own pace, tends her own fire, and waters her own becoming, and that makes her magnetic in a way chasing never could. When she wants something, she does not chase it with panic. She becomes the version of herself that draws it in with grace. Whether it is a partner, a dream, an opportunity, or peace, she knows it must meet her where she stands. She does not shapeshift to earn it. She does not beg to keep it. What comes to her now is invited, not hunted. She lives in the knowing that her frequency speaks before her words ever do, and that kind of energy does not plead. It simply is. It is the energy of someone who has made peace with the empty spaces in her life and learned to fill them with meaning instead of distraction. She no longer enters conversations to be seen. She enters them to witness. She no longer performs her value. She embodies it. She no longer seeks to be chosen. She chooses herself daily with reverence. This shift from chase to creation changes everything, because it means she trusts herself enough to wait. It means she believes her presence is worth arriving for. It means she no longer trades her dignity for temporary closeness or conditional approval. She has built something within that cannot be stolen, and so she does not cling to what can walk away. Her independence is not hardened. It is soft and strong at once. It invites, but it does not pursue. It receives, but it does not grasp. And in a world that often glorifies the hunt, she lives as the one who tends the garden and lets what is meant to bloom find its way to her. That subtle shift rewrites every relationship she enters, because she is no longer seeking salvation, she is sharing her overflow. And that overflow, born from intentional living and rooted presence, becomes the very thing that calls others in not to complete her, but to walk beside someone already whole. There is something about her that resists capture, not because she is withholding, but because she is whole. People try to define her with names that feel like cages, call her independent as if it is a flaw, try to tether her to identities that were never hers to wear, but she does not perform for understanding. She does not contort herself to fit the limited gaze of those who have only ever known women who needed to be claimed to feel valuable. She is not interested in being decoded. She is not here to be owned, labeled, or possessed. She belongs to herself in a way that confuses those who only know how to relate through control or conquest. When they try to name her, they fail. When they try to contain her, they find she has already slipped beneath the surface, dancing in deeper currents they cannot reach, because she is not made of roles or categories or templates. She is made of intuition, lived experience, and an inner landscape she tends like a sacred garden. Her boundaries are not just preferences, they are altars, and not everyone is meant to kneel at them. Those who try to mold her into what makes them comfortable quickly find that she cannot be softened into silence or hardened into something palatable. Her softness is intentional, her solitude is sovereign, and her refusal to be defined by anything other than her own evolving truth makes her feel like wind wrapped in silk. She is both substance and mystery. And when people try to possess her, what they really want is access to her light without earning its trust. They want the glow without the growth, the closeness without the depth, the presence without the patience. But she knows the cost of self-betrayal too intimately to ever pay it again. So she stays close only to those who do not flinch when she shows up as her full self. Those who listen without dissecting, witness without invading, and love without trying to own. The rest fall away. Not in anger, not in drama, but in a quiet recognition that her life is not a museum for others to tour. It is a temple, and temples are not for trespassing. She does not hide her heart, but she protects its rhythms. She does not flaunt her soul, but she shares it with care, because she knows that true belonging begins within. She does not need to be held hostage by approval or touched by hands that do not honor what they reach for. And because she belongs to herself, She moves through the world with a grace that cannot be bought and a strength that cannot be borrowed. She is a woman who remembers who she was before the world told her who to be. She is not elusive to be mysterious. She is elusive because her peace is not up for auction. And the more she stands in that truth, the more others begin to recognize something rare in her presence. A woman who cannot be possessed because she is already claimed by her own becoming, by her own breath, by the wild quiet she now calls home. That kind of woman changes every room she enters. Not because she demands it, but because she does not need it. And that, in the end, is the deepest kind of freedom. She is the kind of woman who does not flinch in silence. While the world around her scrambles to be louder, faster, constantly filled with something to prove its pulse, she sinks deeper into the quiet and lets it steady her. She does not need constant stimulation to feel alive. Her vitality comes from stillness, from that rare willingness to sit in the in-between without reaching for a distraction. She is not afraid of the quiet because she has made peace with herself inside it. She has walked the long corridors of her own mind, turned over the sharp stones of her memory, faced the things most people mute with noise, and returned with a kind of groundedness that feels like gravity. She chooses stillness not because she is passive, but because she is powerful enough not to rush. There is no need to chase what will find her in time. Her decisions are not impulsive echoes of a chaotic world. They are slow drips of knowing, gathered patiently like rainwater in a stone basin. When she speaks, it is not to fill space, but to shape it. When she moves, it is with the deliberateness of someone who knows the cost of wasting energy on what will not last. People do not understand at first why they are drawn to her, but it is her stillness that unsettles and calms all at once. It is the absence of performance, the refusal to compete for attention, the way she sits at the center of her life without theatrics. There is no need for applause when she already approves of herself. In a culture addicted to broadcasting every thought and curating every image, her quiet confidence becomes a rebellion. She does not explain her solitude or apologize for her boundaries. She simply chooses them again and again like a prayer, like a return to what is real. And in her presence, others begin to notice how exhausted they are from all the pretending. Her stillness becomes a mirror. It shows people how noisy they have become in the name of connection. It reveals how much they have forgotten how to sit with their own thoughts without flinching. She does not need to be the loudest to be the most felt. In fact, her stillness often says more than 1,000 words could. She listens without rushing to respond. She watches without needing to react. She breathes without needing to be seen. That kind of stillness is not emptiness, it is mastery. It is a discipline she earned by learning not to be at war with her own presence. She no longer needs chaos to feel relevant. Her peace is not a performance but a practice, and that practice has made her rare. In rooms filled with voices trying to be heard, hers is the silence people turn toward without knowing why. She carries the weight of someone who has made silence her sanctuary. Not a punishment, not a void, but a sacred space where truth reveals itself without noise. She is not afraid of the pause. She lives inside it. And that choice, that devotion to inner stillness, makes her magnetic in a way the world cannot quite name, because she has found something deeper than approval. She has found presence. And presence, when it is born of peace, is the most intoxicating soundless song a woman can sing. She understands that there is power in restraint, in choosing what to reveal and what to hold close like a prayer still forming. She moves through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who has nothing to prove and everything to protect. Her privacy is not a wall built out of fear, but a sanctuary crafted through intention. She is not guarded, she is consecrated. There is a difference. She does not hoard herself out of mistrust, but she has learned through experience that not everyone is worthy of the full access pass to her inner temple. She lets the wrong ones wander. She lets the right ones earn their way into the rooms. She keeps lit with memory and meaning. There is no cruelty in her boundaries, only discernment. She is not a riddle waiting to be solved. She is a landscape with sacred places not marked on any map. People may ache for her openness, but she has stopped trading truth for validation. What she offers is never bait. It is never laced with performance or need. It is her choice, and that choice is everything. Her allure does not come from how much she gives, it comes from how deliberate she is in the giving. Every word she speaks has been weighed against silence. Every story she shares has passed through the filter of self-trust. Her mystery is not a strategy. It is a byproduct of knowing herself so well that she no longer leaks her essence to feel connected. There are moments when she seems to disappear into herself, and others strain to follow, to decode her pauses, to reach for clarity where none is owed. But she is not confusing, she is clear. It is the world that has grown too used to oversharing, to constant availability, to the belief that connection must always be immediate and complete. She is the antidote to that desperation. She leaves space. She leaves people with questions. She leaves conversations with more resonance than resolution. And somehow, that becomes the very thing that draws people closer, not out of entitlement, but out of reverence. She has turned privacy into poetry. It is how she protects her joy, how she shields her grief, how she holds her power without displaying it like a trophy. She knows the cost of being overly explained. She knows what it feels like to be reduced by someone else's misunderstanding. So now she practices the art of sacred withholding. It is not about being unknowable, it is about being sovereign. She will let you into her world, but not all at once, and never out of guilt. Her intimacy is earned in quiet ways, in how she watches to see if your presence is safe before offering more of hers. In how she notices if you listen to understand or simply to respond. In how she waits to see if your interest is rooted in wonder or consumption. This is not a game, it is a deep respect for her own soul. And when she does open, when she does give, it is like sunlight through cathedral glass, rare, undeniable, worth the wait. She is not afraid to be unknown. In fact, she has made peace with being a mystery, because what she withholds is not armor, it is ceremony. And in a world that demands constant access, that kind of sacred self-containment feels like a revelation, like power without noise, like depth without demand, like a woman who belongs entirely to herself. She does not fill silence with sound, nor does she perform knowledge for approval. She understands that words, once spoken, cannot be undone, so she chooses them with care, like rare stones placed gently into the hands of those who are ready to receive them. She listens with her whole presence, not just to what is being said, but to what is not. She hears the tension between lines, the hesitation behind praise, the ache under laughter. She does not interrupt, does not correct to prove a point. She lets people arrive at their own truths, only stepping in when the moment truly calls for it. And when she does speak, it is never with excess. Her sentences feel like strikes of clarity in a foggy room. She names what others are too afraid to face, not to wound, but to free. She does not use her voice to dominate, but to liberate. There is no posturing in her tone, no need to appear wise. She is not interested in being impressive. She is interested in being honest. Her language carries weight because it is never careless. It is rooted in self-awareness, not performance. She does not repeat herself for validation, nor does she soften truths just to be palatable. Yet, there is no violence in her honesty. It lands like a key, not a weapon. She can say the thing no one else will say and somehow leave the room more whole than before. People often find themselves still thinking about her words hours or days later. They echo, they stir, they reveal. She knows how to hold silence as if it were a sacred container, and that makes her voice even more potent when it finally arrives. She does not speak for effect. She speaks when the moment has matured enough to carry what she offers. Her wisdom is not in quantity but in timing. She does not rehearse connection. She meets it as it is. And when she disagrees, she does not argue to win. She speaks in a way that allows others to see themselves more clearly, even if it's uncomfortable. Her precision is not coldness. It is reverence for language. It is respect for energy. It is a refusal to dilute truth just to make others comfortable. Her voice becomes a mirror, not always flattering, but always accurate. Not always easy, but always cleansing. People feel seen when she speaks because she does not pander to masks. She speaks to what is real. And in a world of noise, of talking without listening, of empty declarations and rehearsed empathy, her voice feels like water after drought. It nourishes even when it stings. It illuminates even when it unsettles. She does not fear pauses in conversation. She lets the silence stretch until truth rises naturally. She does not rush to fill the space because she understands that presence is often louder than speech. And when she chooses to say something, it comes from the deepest part of her. It is not crafted to impress. It is born from lived clarity. That is why people remember what she says, not because she speaks often, but because when she does, it is with the precision of someone who has walked through her own fire and come back with language that burns clean. She no longer resents the masculine energy she once had to overperform or avoid. She has met it within herself, not as an enemy or ideal, but as a force to understand and integrate. Jung spoke of the animus as the inner masculine that governs thought, logic, discernment, and direction within the psyche of a woman. But for her, it is no longer just a concept from theory or myth. It is something she has touched, wrestled with, forgiven, and woven into the fabric of her being. There was a time she confused detachment with abandonment, decisiveness with coldness, structure with control. But now she sees that the animus, when not projected outward onto men or internalized as defense, can become a sacred compass. She knows when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to listen. When to walk away not from wounded pride, but from deep knowing. Her independence does not scream, it breathes. It does not demand, it simply is. She is no longer performing strength as a mask for fear. She is strong because she has allowed both her softness and her sovereignty to take up space in her body at the same time. That kind of wholeness cannot be faked, it must be lived. She no longer seeks validation through domination, nor does she shrink herself to appease. The animus she has integrated is not rigid, it is fluid. It partners with her intuition instead of trying to overpower it. It does not make her more masculine. It makes her more whole. People often sense it in how she moves. She does not hesitate. Her boundaries are clear without being cruel. Her pace is deliberate without being forced. She does not ask for permission to lead, yet she leads with such natural gravity that people find themselves following without quite knowing why. There is precision in her words, direction in her gaze, and stillness in her refusal to rush. She is not trying to be anyone's savior or student. She is simply at home in herself. The men who once saw her as competition now sense something else entirely. Not submission, but self-containment. Not defiance, but depth. And the women who used to mistake her calm for coldness begin to understand that it is actually integration that makes her glow the way she does. She can protect and provide. She can hold chaos without becoming it. She can say no without explaining, and yes without fear. The inner masculine she has claimed is not borrowed from a man, it was always hers to awaken. It shows up in her clarity, in her commitment to self-respect, in the quiet authority that cannot be taken because it was never given away. She does not outsource her direction to a partner, a trend, or an old version of herself. She moves because her soul says it is time. And when it is not time, she waits, not in anxiety but in sacred stillness. That kind of trust in one's own rhythm does not come from rebellion, it comes from integration. She has stopped swinging between extremes because she no longer lives in reaction. She lives in response. She chooses what aligns. She releases what does not. And she does it all without drama, because her animus no longer performs, it simply supports. And that support, that steady invisible structure beneath her emotional depth, makes her not only intriguing but unstoppable. Her independence is not noise. It is a frequency only those who have done their own inner work can hear and recognize. She does not plead to be understood, nor does she stage her exit like a spectacle. When something dishonors her soul, be it a person, a place, or a path, she leaves with the same calm she once entered. No slammed doors, no raised voices, no final dramatic speeches etched in fury. Just presence withdrawn like light from a room, and in that absence the weight of her boundaries is felt more deeply than any confrontation could ever deliver. She does not chase clarity where there is only chaos. She does not demand apologies from those too small to offer them. She has learned that begging for respect only teaches people how to withhold it. So she no longer explains her worth to those committed to misunderstanding it. She simply withdraws her energy, her attention, her essence, not to punish, not to manipulate, but to protect the temple that is her peace. and those who once mistook her softness for naivety suddenly find themselves facing a silence that cannot be swayed. Her absence becomes louder than her presence ever tried to be. People remember the sound of her leaving like a song that ends mid-note unfinished, unresolved, unforgettable. She knows that walking away without drama is not weakness. It is mastery. It is the ability to choose dignity over vindication. It is the wisdom to know that not every battle deserves your fire. Some situations are not meant to be fixed. They are meant to be fled. And when she goes, she does not look back. Not out of bitterness, but because she has finally learned to trust the timing of her exits. She understands that some doors must remain closed to protect the growth happening on the other side. She no longer waits for closure from people who would rather keep her confused. Her closure is internal. It lives in her ability to detach from what no longer aligns. It lives in her refusal to make noise just to be noticed. She walks away without warning because she has already had the conversation with herself 100 times in silence. And when she does leave, the silence she leaves behind speaks volumes. It echoes through the spaces where she once gave freely, loved fully, listened deeply. The absence of her presence becomes a mirror that shows others who they were in her light and who they are without it. Some feel guilt, some feel relief, some feel nothing at all. But she does not stay to watch the aftermath. That is not her concern. Her concern is her alignment, her energy, her evolution. And so she goes, gracefully, quietly, completely. No need to justify, no need to announce, just a soft and final bow to what once was, followed by the slow and steady turning of her own page. She does not carry bitterness, she carries wisdom. She does not smear names, she reclaims her own. And that perhaps is what lingers most, the memory of a woman who did not need to raise her voice to raise the standard, who did not need to make a scene to make a point, who did not need to stay loud to remain unforgettable. Her departure is not a performance, it is a prayer. And those who once held her energy too lightly find themselves haunted not by her rage, but by the gentle, unwavering silence of a woman who finally chose herself. She does not linger in your thoughts because she tried to impress you. She did not overextend, overshare, or overstay. She did not perform a version of herself to be adored. And yet, she remains lodged in the corners of your memory like a stone under smooth water, subtle, unshakable. You can't stop thinking about her because something in her presence unsettled you in a way you could not name at the time. It was the way she looked so at home inside herself, the way she carried her solitude like silk and not sorrow. She didn't need you, and that lack of need disarmed you. Not because it was cold, but because it was whole. She awakened a knowing inside you, the kind you tried to outgrow or bury under ambition and distraction. She reminded you of a self you once believed in before the world convinced you to settle for something smaller, quieter, more acceptable. Her independence was not loud, but it echoed in your bones. It made you notice the corners of your own life where you had compromised too much, quieted too often, chased too long. She made you aware of the questions you had stopped asking yourself. Where did you trade passion for permission? When did you decide comfort was more important than aliveness? Why did you stop fighting for the life you actually wanted? Her existence made those questions feel less rhetorical and more urgent, because watching her live so freely, so rooted in her own rhythm, made your own restraints suddenly visible. She did not offer you advice. She did not try to change you, she simply was, and in being so fully herself she became a mirror to everything you had tucked away. That is why you can't forget her. Not because of the words she said or the beauty she carried, but because of the way she made you feel in your own skin. She made you ache not for her, but for yourself, for the self you buried in compromise, for the fire you dampened in order to be loved, for the truth you edited so you could belong. Her presence brought it all back, and once something has been seen, it cannot be unseen. You try to shake the memory, but it is not her you are haunted by. It is the glimpse of your own potential reflected in her eyes. It is the echo of the person you could have been if you had not flinched, folded, or forgotten. She is the reminder that your life can still be reclaimed, that you are allowed to return to yourself, that it is not too late to choose differently. But most people won't. They will continue on the path of almost, of maybe, of next time. They will try to forget her. They will call her intimidating or too much or out of reach, but deep down they will know it was not her who was unreachable. It was their own soul they had stopped reaching for. She simply revealed the distance. And once that gap has been illuminated, it hums like a quiet hunger. So no, it is not a crush, it is not nostalgia, it is not curiosity. It is the sacred discomfort of being reminded that there is more truth, more depth, more life, and that someone is already living it without apology. That is why she stays in your mind. Not because she asked to be remembered, but because she reminded you of something you promised yourself and forgot. She does not walk into rooms needing translation. She does not water herself down into palatable fragments for the sake of being understood by people who have not yet learned to understand themselves. She does not demand comprehension because she has ceased to equate being seen with being validated. Her wholeness does not ask for confirmation. It exists like moonlight on still water, quiet, complete, undisturbed by those who cannot name it. She has become fluent in silence, in nuance, in the language of inner knowing that does not depend on applause. There is no urgency in her to explain the path she chose, nor the seasons she survived. She has outgrown the need to be defined by others, and she has abandoned the temptation to shrink for proximity or safety. The people who approach her expecting a map will leave empty-handed. She does not provide answers in the language they expect because she is not speaking from her wounds anymore. She is speaking from integration. She teaches by presence, not performance. The mystery is not curated. It is lived. Every boundary she upholds, every pause she takes, every moment she chooses alignment over approval is a quiet lesson to the world that self-respect does not need explanation. She has become the kind of woman whose choices are rooted in clarity, not control. She is not trying to be loved for her parts. She is choosing to love herself as a whole. That kind of wholeness intimidates those who seek to possess and confuses those who mistake complexity for contradiction. But she is not here to be easy, she is here to be real. The people who truly see her will never ask her to simplify herself. They will sit beside her in the richness of her depth and know that understanding is not the goal, presence is. And to be in the presence of a woman who does not contort herself to soothe your insecurities is to be invited into your own evolution. She does not coax others toward awakening, she embodies it. And in that embodiment, she becomes a mirror, a map, and a mystery all at once. You cannot reduce her to one role because she has met too many versions of herself to stay in one costume. She has danced with her shadows, wept with her truths, and emerged with a spine made of grace. She is not asking you to keep up. She is inviting you to slow down, to see, to feel. To meet her at the level where masks fall away and only the soul remains. That is where she lives now. And if you do not know how to speak the language of self-ownership and quiet courage, you will miss her entirely. But that does not concern her. She is not performing visibility. She is practicing sovereignty. She will continue to move like the tide, intentional, sacred, and free. And when she is gone, what you will remember is not the sound of her voice or the shape of her smile, but the stillness she carried. The way she made you feel closer to your own soul simply by standing in the truth of hers. She is not a puzzle, she is a presence, and that presence is not here to be decoded, it is here to be honored. That is her legacy. She leaves behind no answers, only permission for every woman watching her to stop explaining, start becoming, and remember that being whole was never about being understood. It was always about being true.